I got a
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are here with the beautiful Cameron. Cameron is a good friend of mine. We've been working together for a while. Cameron is just an awesome human being. And to be honest, Cameron, I've never told you that before, but like before I met you and I read your bio, I was a little bit intimidated, to be honest.
What?
Yeah. Like I do what I do for a long time, but I just loved your bio and I just loved, the things you've been working on. And I was just really like, oh yeah, there's someone that can really challenge me and really inspire me, and I love that. But my first instinct was like, holy smokes, that's been so that was kind of my first impression. Can you maybe tell the audience what you've done so far in your career, maybe a couple of things that you're really proud of or that you really enjoyed doing?
Sure. Well, first of all, I hope I wasn't scary to meet or anything like that.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I'm Cameron. I'm a guitar player from Auckland, New Zealand, and I moved to Australia when I was to study uni, and I studied jazz. I got really into playing jazz guitar. That's kind of all I wanted to do when I first started out, and then that kind of got me into being a studio musician, and that's when I fell in love with making records. So that's what I've been doing the whole time since, is making albums. So what we'll chat about today, I'm sure, is the making of albums and how they come about, and the good ways to do it, the bad ways to do it, and all the in-betweens. And I'm addicted to it. I kind of always have to be working on a record. I think if I'm not doing that, I don't quite feel right. So that's my home base for sure. And then from there, I've been lucky to work in heaps of touring work, been in a bunch of bands, still in lots of bands, playing lots of music. And then also, some film, some TV, all things along the way. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to chat about how you flesh out a whole career in this crazy industry we're in. And then the other thing I like to do is I like to sail across oceans, have a boat, and I like to go sailing. So I don't know if I'll make it in this podcast, but anyway, I also like to sail.
That's a good combination, I find, right? Just getting into the turmoil and getting out of the turmoil and getting perspective, macro, hey.
Yeah, just before we were talking about getting away out into the country, and it's like it's so important. You were saying you used the word decoupling, and it's true. And I reckon early on we should just be saying here, that's important. Perspective on what you do is so important, especially as makers. Like we're here trying to create art and create beauty, and if we don't have our foot firmly in the real world, i.e. genuinely outside of the music industry, which can be such a crazy fake place, if we're not plugged into the real world and experiencing what's possible, then what are we making music about? Music has to come from somewhere.
Yeah, totally agree. As this recharging, this kind of reinventing, getting a different perspective. I don't know about you, Cam, but like for me, like when I make music for myself, but especially also for others, I need to kind of see things from their perspective, and I can't do that when I sit in my chair. So I like to, for example, I'm just, recording like a surf rock album, and for that, just being on the ocean last weekend, for example, it just creates a different vibe, and I get different, not even ideas, but different energies, and bringing that back into a studio, in a dark, cozy place. It's fairly interesting. You just mentioned like, music industry can be a fake place. What does that mean?
Oh man, well, I have I've been making music professionally, I guess, now for 25 years, and I've just seen enough to know that I have some of the most beautiful friendships I've ever had in my life in one side of the industry, and the other side, I've had some of the kind of, I describe it as a bit icky, bit gross kind of feeling in terms of transactional nature of approaching what is a beautiful artistic process. And so I sort of see both sides. Maybe it's might call a necessary evil. Maybe you do need to make peace with it and go, well, rather than reacting to it like I am now, I'm using these adjectives like icky and gross to describe how I earn my living. I should maybe I need to have more peace with it. But I do find it's so hard to quantify aspects of the process. Like, I mean, we can go into more detail, but there's some things I'll work on for years, and it seems so. If I was to break that down in terms of money earned and time spent, it would be ridiculous. And then there's other things that fall out of the sky and right into your lap. But maybe you needed to be working on those things for years, but for the other opportunities to come along. And for me, I have to see it, I have to zoom out and see it from the longer term perspective to see it all kind of evens out in terms of if you need so much luck to be in the music industry, but I also believe that the more committed you are to it, the more available you are to that luck.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. I always remember that quote, luck is a byproduct of hard work. And I really tend to believe that more and more, because I feel that the lucky people in the music industry are also usually the ones that absolutely work their ass off. I've never, like luck in the short term, yes, you can be at the right time at the right place and record a hit single or whatever. But I mean, luck as a constant, let's say overall, right, over a long-term career, of course, it goes always up and down. But the people that end up on top, I always find that they are hardworking, extremely humble, and they're always trying to push their own envelope, right? And I think if you do that, then you attract that luck in your life as well, because if you constantly put yourself out there, well, you attract opportunities because people are able to see you, right? I very rarely found it that someone made a hit song, had no followers on social media, had no communication skills, suddenly got a world hit without anything. I mean, not that didn't happen, but it's more likely to happen if you have a good team, if you have a good work ethic around you on a constant basis, right?
Well, yeah, you're describing infrastructure, which is really important too. There's something about the chipping away at it and sort of you never really know where the next opportunity is going to come next. So you kind of got to be ready for it and also recognize it. Like maybe the biggest pop thing I've worked on is this track I did with SIA, and that happened literally in 24 hours. And she's a friend that I knew, and I know her band, her touring band, and it's just this sort of. I played guitar on a bunch of her tracks just over a period of years. And then suddenly she emails me out of the blue, says, I need you to do she specifically wanted the sound of guitar that I make. And she says, I need your approach on this thing. It needs to be delivered tonight. And she was in LA and I was on holiday in South Australia at the beach. And it's like, you go, well, I have to do this. So I kind of just dropped everything and I had to learn this song, and then I had to record as quickly as I could. There's one studio I knew in Adelaide where I could go and work, and I said, I'm coming in right now. I need to work right. And they were like, we've got a booking, but we'll cancel it. And I kind of felt bad that I bumped out this little pump down, which is funny. Like as I was bumping in, they were bumping out like, pop music sucks, man. Bad. It was kind of funny. But I got in there and I recorded this thing and had a ball and just had fun because as a validation, I was being asked to do what I do, knowing that this is an opportunity to create music at an extremely high level, but it was on my own terms and it felt really empowering. So I had a really fun day in the studio and I sent the stems that night, and it ended up evolving into like, well, thanks for the guitars, and now we need you to replace some of the keyboards and guitars on the track. And I ended up becoming the producer of that track in a very quick period of time, just because I was available for that opportunity to happen. And it ended up finishing, just as I was sending up the last stems, I thought, man, you know what this song needs? It needs piano. And I'm back now in this holiday house. I was at my wife's parents' place and sitting there going, man, this song needs piano. Just on the chorus, just some lovely chords. And I made the mistake of emailing the mix engineer in LA saying, is the mix on the console yet? Can I, I'm thinking piano. And he goes, dude, I'm pulling it up now. I'm like, oh no. So I'm like, well, and I look, I'm literally, I've got my Logic rig on my laptop, and that's all I had. So I pulled up a piano emulated this sampler that I had with a piano on it, and I used that thing, musical typing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm like, this is horrible. And I've got this horrible piano sound, and I'm just clunking away on the keyboard. And I'm about to email this. The mix engineer for that track is Manny Marroquin, who did like,
oh, yes.
Man's Beyonce's mix engineer. And I'm about to send him like some like musical typing key piano from Logic. And I was like, this is horrible. And then I look out the corner of my eye and I see my wife's dad's old vintage upright piano.
Oh,
Oh man, hang on. And I go over and I'm like, is this even in tune? And so like I gingerly hit middle C, and like it's out of tune, but it's like only a little out of tune. In fact, maybe it's even out of tune enough to be kind of cool. Mm-hmm, I'm like, yeah, all right. And then I have no way to record it. So I pull the face of the piano off, the backing board behind the keyboard. I pull it off. So I'm just exposed all the hammers. I get out my phone, yes, and I put on voice memos, and I sit it on the hammers, and I'm like, just recording. Then I quickly just record just one shots of all the chords, email myself the voice memo of all the chords, slice them in Logic, and just lay them into the track. 10 minutes later, I've got this, and then I actually mixed it with, I used the Logic piano. I verbed it out 100%, took out all the dry signal, then just used the Logic as this epic verb on this strange upright piano. Ended up with this crazy spooky piano sound that's really weird. Like, how do you get this weird hammer, really strong hammer sound of a strange out of tune upright piano, but with this lush, rich reverb tail on it? And it's like I emailed that off within half an hour, and it got slapped in the mix. I had it bounce back from LA within the hour. And you're like, dude, it's done. And now I can't. Yeah. But that's the thing, what we were just talking about, of like, that's so lucky, all of what I just described. But you also have to be ready to see the opportunity and pounce. And it took all those other years of just me knowing these other people, and it's all through friends that you make along the way, and these relationships you build. Because if you're a decent person and fun to work with, and they think, yeah, I know if I email Cameron, he's probably going to send me something interesting. So that's just how that came about.
Yeah. So you mentioned here, it's the one thing, obviously you need to know what you're doing, and you need to be brave enough to execute it. But I think, and like over the years, what I've found overall, like there is this kind of like threshold, like in the beginning, people don't know how good or bad they are, and they're quite insecure about it. They might be humble, but might not be confident yet to execute things because they're not able to, right? And then you have kind of like, I would say, the young professional, and they might lucky, and they got maybe just a deal, and they either end up very cocky or emotional unstable, or both at the same time. But what I found, if you climb that ladder up for people who are doing their thing for a long time, I've never met a high profile artist or producer or anyone in the industry really that isn't humble, and that isn't real, and that isn't authentic, and that isn't afraid to say no, or isn't afraid to say yes to something cool, right? And that's really, at that point, it's so easy to connect, because we all know in the end of the day, we are here because we're lifting others up, and we're here because we're connecting with each other, right? It's this ecosystem of symbiosis. And yes, you have the occasional asshole in the way, but I really believe you can't be an asshole in the long run in the industry. You can't, because you're always relying on other people. What we're doing is too big to be successful in the long run if you do it on your own. I've never experienced that. And so, just being a decent being, right? I mean, that's so important.
It's super important, man. You're right on. Like if you're a good person, so much more is available to you just in life. And it's the same within music too. Like, we only want to work with people that make us shine as well. We all want to help each other. I like what you said about symbiosis. That's true, man.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I liked about your SIA story is I often find find this excuse very often working with clients who say, I cannot achieve B because I don't have A, B, C, D, blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean? Like, I cannot make a good, decent record because I don't have a 5K microphone, or I don't have money to go in the studio, right? But I mean, what we're seeing now over and over again, like the recording process is completely liberalized now, right?
Yeah.
Like Charlie Puth's, I mean, just look it up on Google, Charlie Puth's iPhone recording or whatever. Just a lot of his recordings he does on his iPhone, imports in Logic or whatever program he's using, and turns it into beautiful things, right? He can't play bass, but like the bass sounds that he plays on his keyboard are just phenomenal. You know, everything. Most people record at their home studio now. Most people, you know, and then maybe work with a producer later on or add something to it. I would say that's probably similar what SIA does a lot of times as well, right? Where she kind of gets co-producers. And I just want to appeal to everyone who is creative. Like, you don't need a high-end guitar, you don't need high-end equipment. The basic equipment like that you get for $200-300 is more than enough to make really, really good records. If you know what you're doing.
It becomes about the idea. An example of exactly what you're talking about is a close friend of mine is Francois Titaz, the awesome Australian producer, and he worked with Gautier on his big song "Somebody I Used to Know," and that first verse is Wally, who's Gautier, singing into the mic on his laptop, and just for that first verse, and it's because they love the immediacy of that sound. You can't beat that sound of this kind of crummy laptop mic. But then there's other beautiful, expensive mics they're using in that song too. But there's something about it, and it's like it just becomes a tool. And what you're describing is true. It's like just use the tools available. All of this equipment we have is so more advanced than so many of the great records we love. Like, I'm a jazz fan, and I think of all the great jazz records on the Blue Note label from, you know, the 40s and 50s. They did it all on 4 tracks. You know, it's like if they had 4 tracks, some of them would have been a bounce down, you know, straight away to tape. And it's like, man, there's more power in my phone in terms of recording capacity than what they had. But it becomes about the idea, and that's what's more important than ever.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think we're suffering more or less, and I still have that from, you know, choice paralysis, right? Where we, you know, overthink instead of just doing. You know, I even think like a Rode NT1, like, which is a very simple like condenser mic for $200-300, compared to a very high end, let's say a C12 or whatever for, you know, $250,000 or whatever. I think in the mix, necessarily they're not better or worse. They're just really, really different.
Yeah, they're different. Well, the SM7, man, how much of the great records in the world has been made on SM7? You know?
Exactly. So, you know, just get yourself out there, and don't be afraid. Even, you know, don't have a big studio. Your phone recordings, they are so good compared to the majority of recordings that we hear. You know, like in the history of recording. So don't let that get away from you. Cameron, when it comes to guitar playing, how did you decide to become a guitar player in the first place, and what kind of like ideas did you have about becoming a professional? Like, was there a point in time where you said like, no, I want to make that my living? Those 2 questions. So how did you get into it, and when did you decide to go pro?
Yeah, I love the guitar, and it's something that I've had since earliest childhood. Like, my dad is what I would describe as a terrible party guitarist. He has like a beat up old nylon string just kicking around the house. Growing up, there was always a guitar lying around, and it was always in tune because you never knew when a party was going to start and you needed to like play. So he would have his mates come around on a Friday after work, and they would all sing and play songs together. And that's just what adults did. And I thought it blew my mind as a little kid. Like, what is this weird alchemy that's happening? You know, my dad plays 4 chords on a nylon string guitar, and suddenly this joyous thing is happening, so much, so electric. And as a child, you just respond to that energy. You're just like, this is way more interesting than video games, you know, just watching people sing together. And so that's all I wanted to do, was just be able to play Paul Simon songs with my dad. And so I'd take 2-3 guitar lessons, and then you suddenly realize dad sucks. And you could play better than your dad after 2 guitar lessons. But it's like, well, that's cool. And then that began the journey of like, well, where do I want to go with this? And I became that kid that just dragged the guitar around behind them at all times. I was just annoying to everybody. If you were trying to watch TV, I'd come and sit next to you and play Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton really loud next to you, and you'd be like, can you leave? But it just became a thing. It's just what I would do. I just always play guitar. At lunchtime at high school, I'd be sneaking into the music room at school, just we had a little Tascam 4-track cassette recorder at my school, and I would just try and make terrible recordings on that. Like, not even know what I was doing, but just, I had a Chili Peppers cover band in high school, and that's all we wanted to do. So the choice to become professional didn't really happen at any one point. What I decided after school, I was lucky to be able to go and study music. I moved from, my whole family moved from Auckland in New Zealand to Adelaide in South Australia, where there's a really good music school in Adelaide called the Elder Conservatorium at the University of Adelaide. And I just signed up and studied. I didn't get in straight away. I was like, I don't think my audition was very good. And again, that's if there's any one consistent theme throughout my career, is I've never been anywhere near the best at what I do. I just keep doing it and keep finding your own ways. Like, for instance, my guitar playing, like, I don't know if we're recording video here, but I'm holding up my hand. I've only got 4 fingers on one thumb and 3 fingers on my right hand, and my left hand there's missing some joints and knuckles. So I have to play guitar left-handed for a start, straight away. And I can't really just follow chord voicing charts the same as anyone else. Like, I can grab some of those chords, but definitely not all of them. And so I've kind of had to, from the beginning, figure out a different way of playing. And initially that was a drag, like not being able to play exactly like everyone else. But pretty soon I realized I'm just going to sound different to everybody. I'm grabbing different chords. I'm playing the guitar in a different way, just through no choice of my own. It's literally just how it happens. And so consequently, I sound a bit different. And as I left university and became a recording musician, the fact that I sound different on the guitar, it suddenly becomes my calling card. It becomes my stock and trade. If you want guitars to sound this certain way, then call Cameron, because it's going to sound like that when I play. It just is. It's just going to sound, yeah. So there wasn't a conscious choice to become professional, but I definitely found that as I finished university and I was able to read music, and I became employable. And this is sort of early 2000s in Sydney at this stage. I moved to Sydney, and I really just tried to scratch together and play gigs around Sydney. And in my 20s, I didn't really know what gigging was or performing was. I would just say yes to everything that would come on my phone. I'd say, yeah, sure. I just play parties, clubs, bars, events, any functions, anything. Just literally play any style of music, anything, which ended up becoming a great resource because you get exposed to so much kinds of music. And then as my artistic practice, I'd say it slowly evolved, and it's still evolving. Like I feel it's taking me so long to formulate what I really love in terms of my own artistic practice that I'm kind of glad I didn't make 20 records early on because I don't know if I want to be listening to them right now. I kind of feel like I'm only just figuring it out. It takes a long time, but yeah. So I don't have a good answer in terms of choosing to become professional, but I kind of had to. And at some point, you've got to pay rent, so you just start playing everything.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying, that first of all, you got exposed to music quite early on, and you kind of like connected music with joy and communicating, and then because you had different circumstances, like literally physically with your hands, you turned those downsides into your strengths. You turned your weaknesses into your strengths by developing a different style that you then got known for and booked for, and probably there was also a reason why SIA contacted you, because you had that defined sound of yours. And I like what you said, that you just started saying yes to everything, And I think that's a really underrated thing for beginners to do, because I think right now we're kind of like, thanks to social media, I think we have this feeling that we, need to choose really wisely. And I think down the path, if you have less time, that you have opportunities, of course, you need to choose more. But I think especially in the first 5 to 10 years of your creative endeavor, you need to expose yourself to everything. Because the fact is, Cam, and you probably know that yourself, the shittiest gig always offers the greatest return in hindsight, right? Because you've learned a great deal, you met the right person that really opened up a big thing, right? Or you really learn what you don't want to do anymore. That's also equally important, right?
Yeah.
So I really encourage everyone, like in the first couple of years, eat shit, like do the shitty thing, do the shit thing, like never say no unless it physically harms you, right? And sometimes that also means that you pay to play. I mean, I'm not a big fan. I would never recommend someone saying like, yes, please pay money to pay, but to play somewhere. But I think in the beginning, it's really important to understand that everything that you learn is only from adversity, and it's only from overcoming obstacles. And you have so many obstacles when you play shitty gigs and say yes to everything, that later down the track, like nothing can really like, bring you in turmoil anymore, because you most likely have experienced it already.
Yeah.
And you gain that confidence, right? Because you went through that phase. And right now I think there are a lot of artists who, who come to me, and probably also to you, and say like, oh, I really want to be famous, or I want to make it, or I want to go pro. And as much as I admire that, but also knowing, well, it will take you probably at least 3, 5 to 10 years, if at all. But you need to be willing to eat shit, and you need to be willing to, do the hard thing. I think there's really no shortcut if you want to make it a career. I think it's a different path, right? If you just want to be a one-hit wonder, find one of the remaining casting shows, get your 3 months of semi-fame, and, you'll be fine with that if that's what you want to do. But I really like that you said yes to everything. And I think that's really important as an emerging artist. Totally. Really cool. So when like, what was your transition then, Cam, to becoming a producer and exploring that field? What happened there? You said you spent a lot of time in studios, then become a studio musician.
Yeah, I describe myself as a studio rat, just always hanging out in studios. In the 2000s in Sydney, I paid rent at a studio that I built. We kind of built with a couple of friends just in the inner city of Sydney. We just would rent. It moved to a few locations, but we'd all just chip in a bit of rent to all share the studio space, and we kind of all just played and produced each other's records coming through that space. And it really opened my eyes to a huge array of music. I was still kind of a jazz nerd at that stage, but then I started playing on my first pop records around that time, and getting involved more in songwriting. So probably my path towards production came more through songwriting than anything, working with artists in terms of developing their material, also becoming an arranger. I really value arrangement in terms of a production process. It's super, it's almost like an endangered species now. Now in the age of click and drop, arranging is automated, for us. Yet so many of these fundamental choices that become production choices, and for me become artistic choices, are in the arranging and choosing of how do we introduce new elements, and thinking of music in terms of a color palette, and how do we want to create a narrative arc in our music. So I came to production through that angle. Like in terms of my minuscule engineering abilities, they've always become, I've learned those skills in a pragmatic fashion. Like I just like, how do I activate it? How do I record arm a track in Pro Tools? Like, I just look it up, and maybe that's all I know how to do is record one single track at once. But then that's all I kind of needed, because that would keep my head out of the DAW, the digital audio workstation, and more in the arranging zone of just thinking like creatively why rather than how. Different question. And I'm grateful that the production work I've done since has always come from that question of why, and less focused on the technique of production. Nowadays, it's where we're all learning how to do this stuff just by watching YouTube, which is a fantastic resource, and I use it all the time to learn stuff. It's almost taken for granted that operating a DAW equals production, and for me, that doesn't ring true. Like it's just, a DAW is just a tool, and in fact, it's a powerful tool, and I use it as a compositional tool. Mm-hmm. For me, it's a place to create, not just to render or. Render would be the word I'd use. It's a place to write songs and a place to write music, but it has to always, for me, always be about the why and what's the reason for existing, rather than I need drums, so I'm going to click these drums and put these in. You know, it becomes there's so much redundancy now in creative choices and songwriting, and that's resulting in a homogenizing of our musical choices. And I kind of bemoan that. It's like, why we need more people doing the wrong thing. And in the most open-hearted way possible, I refer to my dear friend Angus, who's in the works in the band Liars, which is a project I've just started working with, and you know, part of the band now, and it's a fantastic experience. He deliberately wants to remain an amateur in using Pro Tools. We're about to release the 10th record as Liars. He's made them all on Pro Tools, and he's an editor and a composer in tools, but he never wants to become good at it because he's afraid those skills are going to then become this pathway that he follows time and time again. By being a curious amateur at the technology, you can stay with a sort of naivety that you need, perhaps, where your imagination can be more fully engaged. So consequently, the flip side of that is I'll get stems and stuff from Angus, and it's disaster audio. It's all peak. It's clipping, it's peaking, it's all. But man, the feeling in this stuff that I get, like he can connect with you straight away in these ideas. He'll send me a 30-second thing of like, here's what I was thinking about this, and you just can't believe what you're hearing. Like, this doesn't sound like anything. But then you pull up the waveform and it's just a rectangle. Like there's no transients to edit any of this. I don't know where. You know, but I say, bless him. That's what he should continue to do, to compose this in this style, because he's plugged. Well, I describe it as he's plugged in. You know, he's plugged in the mainframe. He's accessing something that if he was distracted by the pursuit of technique in operating his Pro Tools, then perhaps he would be, he wouldn't be able to access what he can.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think, you know, many people refer that quality as having a beginner's mindset, right? Or a student mindset, where you deliberately put yourself in that situation that you relearn or unlearn things in order to not follow the same path and make the same song or make the same, you know, choices over and over again. I really like that. You know, I think it becomes less and less important, or I hear it less and less. And I think a big reason for that is just that music, or let's say the function of music, especially like in popular music, degrades more and more to a form of merchandise than an art form, right? I mean, I'm not saying that artists are not making money through selling the music anymore, but it's definitely way less, and music degrades more to a form of merchandise and of advertising to bring people to shows, or you know, buy T-shirts or buy other things from the artist. And I think if you now take away the importance of making better choices, which also takes a lot of time and failure and you know, investment and risk, and I think those are all things that the music industry is not, especially in the big game, is not willing to take anymore. Right? That's why we have this feeling we hear the same 808 in like every second song, because it works, and it's just a safe choice. It is good enough. And you know, I don't know who said it, but you know, perfection is, or good is the opponent or the enemy of of perfection, right? And I think that's similar to what you say, like we need to make more bad choices, right? Or, you know, almost like unique choices, make different choices deliberately. And I feel that too. I don't like making the same song anymore. I like producing bad sounds. And uh, and it's not just something where we feel we idolize the past and we, you know, we look back, but if we look at really transformational records in these days, that is a living and breathing example. I always, you know, I always say like what Australian artist Billie Eilish, right, with her brother, recorded in the, you know, in his bedroom over months, simple, you know, simple workstation, simple equipment, and but the approach to the music is just so different. And of course, luck was involved and blah blah blah, but it's one of the most successful debut records of all times because of making deliberately stupid choices, like, you know, spending weeks on one vocal track, not having certain instruments, right? When you speak about arrangement, right, like deliberately not saying like, no, this track only has 2 elements and that's it. What can we do with it, right? The creative restriction to really enhance what we want to say, instead of like taking away by layering and layering all of this low quality, you know, instruments and stuff. So I totally agree with it. And I feel like, I don't know, what do you think? Do you feel like that music is going slowly back to this idea of creating sounds that are unique versus compatibility, you know, of being compatible with the current industry? Or do you feel like we're all going at the moment into like one big song kind of? What do you feel?
I'm going to say both, and
Yeah.
I say that in terms of we live in an ocean of sound right now. There's never been more music than right now, and putting out music has never been harder and easier at the same time. So both of those examples you just described are happening right now. There definitely is a large, a real paradigm shift away from homogenization in terms of production choice to the more articulate, more labor intensive, and more interesting scope. But at exactly the same time, there's a stampede towards the normalization of music. And it seems incongruous that they can both be happening at the same time, but there just is that much music now. And it's kind of scary. It's kind of liberating in a strange way, but it's never been more important to identify with what it is that makes us special and our own unique thing. It's all we have at the end of the day. And if that has to be preserved throughout the process, and I know people who'd be listening to this podcast are on different parts of that journey. And for those who are in the early stages and just beginning their choices in terms of making music and looking towards a pathway into a professional career in making music, if all you take from listening to us talk today is just sound like you know, it's so important to have your, whatever it is, whatever weird thing you're into, whatever you're drawn to, that's it. That you use the example of Billie Eilish. She sounds just like herself. That example reminded me of, I'm from Auckland in New Zealand, and there's a artist from there called Lorde, and she's the same. She's a teenager when she started out, but she worked with producer Joel Little, who I've met along the way, and I've spent a little bit of time in his studio. And his studio is bare bones. He just has minimal tools that he knows that works. He has the things that work for him. He doesn't have the stuff that doesn't work. He hasn't rushed out and tried to buy 1 million keyboards and 1 million drum machines and try. He just has the stuff that works for him. And she writes the songs in the way that's authentic to her. And the two of them come together and make music that changes pop music forever. And that's the thing. That's what you need to have, is just a voice that's unique to you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Hey, I have like 2 really stupid questions. Yeah, but the first one is,
I might have some stupid answer.
Good. So my first stupid question is, what does a producer actually really do? Like, I mean, we talked about it a lot, but like when I got into music and, you know, people talked about producing, I had no clue. So what, like, just a question for you, like, how do you define the work of a producer? What does he or she do?
If you're gonna try and describe it, all types of production in one go, which is a massive generalization, I just describe it as enabling. And there's so many different ways to enable. You can be literally a producer engineer who's across the whole process. And I think of some a friend of mine is a great producer, John Agnello, who works with Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr. And he operates a Neve console. He just uses Neves wherever he can. He only wants to use Neves, and he can pull a sound out of these consoles that is just so delicious and magical. He can play some instruments, and he can also sing a good BV, but he really knows how to use a console, and that's a beautiful thing to watch. But then, just briefly, we mentioned Joel Little, who's the great producer with Lord. He really knows how to use his MacBook. He uses a MacBook Pro and really is a virtuoso on that. I describe it as, the same as being an instrumental virtuoso. You think of those hours a classical violinist must put in order to play the classical repertoire. Well, Joel has put that into his time on his MacBook and just he's so fast and so quick. So that's another style of production. But both what John's doing and what Joel is doing, whether on the Neve console or on the MacBook Pro, they are enabling a vision to be achieved. So the other example I don't know is, I've never met, but a fan of his work is Rick Rubin, who's the guy on the couch in the yoga pose, telling you like, let's do another take, or let's take a break, or he might provoke a response through simply a conversation. Yet there's other producers who are just deep dive, one-stop shops. There's I lived and worked for some time in Los Angeles, and there's quite a few producers who I'd use who I would say would use a model designed by Greg Kirsten, who's a great songwriter producer, worked with Deyell and SIA and Beck and so many great artists. But he is a virtuoso piano player, like incredible jazz piano player, but is also a great drummer, bass player, guitarist, a multi-instrumentalist. Yet he's also taught himself how to use his audio workstation, and he's built a writing space where artists can come in, and it's a one-stop shop. You come in for a session with Greg, he's going to be able to, whatever ideas you've got cooking, and through a conversation, he's going to be able to generate immediately, like be able to play piano and bass and guitar, and because he's set up the studio in such a way, he can super quickly record these sounds and capture that initial rush of composition. He's enabling. It's another form of enabling, where you can have a session with Greg, and in a period of just a few hours, you're going to leave with a really realized work. So it's a fascinating process. All of these producers I'm talking about, they're all producers, but they work in very different ways, but all with the same aim of helping realize an emotion, a thought, into a piece of recorded art. That would be the output, recorded art.
Recorded art. Yeah, there were really beautiful examples. I definitely resonate with that. And for me, like when I work as a producer, I think bringing, first of all, really listening to an artist, really listening, and listening to music, and listening to the idea, listening to the fears that an artist has, to the wishes, to the way that the artist speaks or the band speaks, when you say intimate, and translating that, or like a brown sound or a blue sound, or like all of those flavors, right? Or I want a floral arrangement or something like that, right? And where we kind of translate that into sonic appearances, and in the end, even though sometimes the producer does 99% of the work, sometimes they just do 1% of the work, right? Depending of the artist. But in the end, giving a certain feeling of empowerment for the artist to say like, wow, this is exactly what I wanted to say, but couldn't do without the translation of a producer. And I think that is that is a beautiful thing as a producer. And I think it takes a certain type of person to become a producer. I think you can't. I think the worst producers are actually artists who are resentful that they haven't fulfilled their own success story, and in order to make money, wanna produce now other artists. I think that's really bad, because I don't know. What do you think? Like, is a producer an artist or not? Is a producer, or is it a service provider? What do you think?
Oh no, absolutely an artist. And the example I'd give is the concept of producer as composer. This is something I'm super interested during lockdown here in Melbourne. While we've all been stuck in place, I've gone back to university environment. I'm now a graduate student back at University of Melbourne studying composition, because I love the idea of the role of producer, using it as a compositional tool. Immediately, I think of the great, Brian Eno, who uses the recording studio. He might arrive in the studio with no preconceived idea of what he wants to achieve, but he'll bring in collaborators. He'll follow his muse amongst the equipment he has in order to generate this architecture and create these beautifully rich artistic statements. You think of those ambient records in the 70s, you think of his solo pop records. The record I'm loving right now is one called Evening Song with Robert Fripp, which is he bringing in Robert Fripp as a guitarist. And from his standpoint as producer, using the studio as a compositional tool in order to create these beautiful artworks. So that absolutely resonates with me. I've just released my project of my reimagined sea shanties, and my primary tool for realizing this work, which is these slowed down, reimagined sea shanties, where I've created instrumental versions of these ancient melodies, but I've done it from a production standpoint. So I've slowed the tapes down. There's lots of audio processing. I've interwoven found sound, oceanic sounds. There's all kinds of sounds, as well as beautiful studio recording as well, because I really wanted to create a listening experience, because in essence of what I'm trying to achieve from a production point of view is the passage of time. Music is a snapshot, the same way it's like a fossil. We're frozen in the sandstone of time, this little snapshot. But what I wanted to play with is use these ancient melodies that haven't been sung in 150 years, that lie dormant in my mind at the bottom of the ocean. And my job is to dredge them up. And what do they sound like now with the ravage of time? That the melodies have been stretched and there's barnacles growing on them. But these are all things I can show from a production standpoint. This artistic vision I have, I go, well, I know in terms of production how I can get to this endpoint. I need to, slow the tapes down and have this really something about grand piano played and then slowed down to sounds. Oh man, I could listen to that all day. So from a point of view in order to answer your question, is that point of view of being a producer in some ways is almost the most artistic place you can be, because you have your hands in the dirt. You're playing with the clay. You can go in any direction you want. And I find it extremely liberating, and I find it fascinating to see artists that are also producers. My dear friend Angus being one from Liars. He's an incredible producer who's also an incredible artist. But there's so many, especially in the hip hop field, you think of so many great, Anderson .Paak and these sorts of just fiercely talented multi-instrumentalist producers and artists. But my guess is if you were to talk to Angus or Anderson .Paak, either, who are two different worlds, but they would both say they perhaps even don't necessarily differentiate. But whether they're walking up to a vocal mic to sing a take, or whether they're then editing that take, or whether they're then editing the whole track, it's the creative process. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, there's definitely a new guild of artists, or of, let's say, multi-talented, multifaceted creatives that kind of blend and meld all of those different creative instances that in the past usually have been segregated in different persons and people. I mean, always exceptions, right? I mean, with Prince, obviously, Lenny Kravitz, and so on, and many others. But let's say the majority, usually, let's say in the major label period, has usually been segregated or separated in different people. But yeah, we definitely see that, and I think that can result in just a really fresh, cohesive vision, right? Where you have one person really guiding the process. That can be quite nice. It's really interesting because, see, for me, like, I don't think a producer is an artist. Like, especially if I work with other artists. And not saying that I might not be an artist, but my perception of myself when I work with another artist is like, I want to enhance the artist that I work on. And I think me maybe saying like that I'm not an artist kind of leaves my ego at the door and just really completely gets into like, I want to understand not my vision. I don't want to make my record. I really want to make sure that everything I do is enhancing the vision of the artist, that he or she can't express himself or herself, right? And staying in that service mentality kind of detaches my ego from the output, so that sometimes I make records where I feel like, wow, I would make really different choices, but my artist is so unbelievably happy and they really own the songs now because it's their song and it's not my song. And in that way, kind of, I safeguard myself from, steering away from the beginner's mindset, because, working with others and others have different things that they like. It's kind of like it pushes me towards that, being in that mindset, like, okay, I have no idea, so I need to really listen, right? I have no idea what I'm doing, so I really need to make sure that I really listen. I listen to the examples of the artists, I listen to the music that they like, and the direction that they want to go to. So I think both is right, none, so I don't know, but it's really interesting, the definition. And I think my other stupid question is, how do we make money as a musician, as a producer? Like, how do you actually pay your rent? How do you afford like going away on sailing trips? Like what does that practically look like? Because that's, usually people don't talk about that. It's like, oh yeah, well, I'm a producer or I'm a musician, but I find it really interesting, especially as a young artist. I would like to know, well, ultimately, like, where does the money come from?
It's true, and then I agree with you. There needs to be more honesty in this space, because we need to be fearless in our decision making as artists, but also knowing, how can I activate an income stream from different parts of my practice? And it's any honest information is so valuable to especially emerging artists. So my first answer would be, it takes multiple income streams. There's no one way you're going to get paid. You shouldn't just focus on one thing. A mistake as a young artist is to think, well, if I just sort out my publishing, then everything else, that'll take care of everything. If I can get some syncs with some songs, then those checks are going to pay for all my shows. Well, it's not. You need the shows and you need the publishing. I can only talk from my own experience, and a dear friend of mine described it as turning on lots of taps, and it's about activating lots of income streams, that some of them might seem quite small, and some of these publishing checks you'll get for hilariously small amounts of money in some territories. You almost, you want to frame that check and go, well, that's what I got paid for in Argentina. It's like, it's hilarious, but you need all of those taps dripping away, and there's obviously turbocharged exceptions, and we look up the top of the tree and we see these very wealthy artists. There's so few of people I know in the industry who would be described in any terms of being wealthy, but you have to look a bit more holistically. And I was lucky to spend 3 years of my life living in India, and to live this life I have right now. It's a humble life I have, but I get to eat beautiful food. I hang out with my family. It's here in Australia, we have healthcare that will look after us. We are fortunate, and so if you set your expectations of, I want to live a happy life, a healthy life, then that becomes, you can then extrapolate back and go, well, now how can I use my practice as an income generation tool? And there's going to be many different ways that all seem small, but they will get there. The trap being and of saying, well, I need to be this kind of famous or this kind of rich or this kind of, those kind of goals will never be met, and that's not even the right way to go about pursuing those goals. So I have no advice to give to people who are pursuing that sort of shortcut path. And I'd always be loath to put a time on it and say, you know, you move to a new town and within 6 months you should be playing shows at these kinds of clubs. And, you know, it's like, there's no one standardized answer for that. I'm just, my only advice would be, do your thing and take it serious. Because if you're taking it serious, others will too. Your stories, me talking about sea shanties and recording piano for SIA with my iPhone, these seem like stupid stories to me, but I know that's just because it's inside my own perspective. By sharing the stories with my friend Michel, he's saying, oh, that sounds interesting. And that's, you know, here, you're hopefully getting something from my perspective, and hopefully people might enjoy the way I play guitar and record it. And as long as we are out there and taking what we do seriously and presenting it and saying, here is something of value, it's going to generate around the place small, little, strange kinds of income that then weld together to eke out this existence. And that's my business model, and it might not be a great one. I'm first to admit, but what it is satisfying, because I'm in control of the terms of what I control, the framework of how my music is presented and how my art gets out there, and the way which I present myself. So I feel super grateful for that. It's the most charmed and lucky of lives, and the riches, aside from income and just in terms of life experience, those times, hilarious times on a tour bus in a weird town, you know, you'll laugh so hard, you have the most joyous times. It's in terms of life experience and looking back at a life well lived, the time spent making music with your friends, it's almost the most important thing, you know. So there's, yeah, that's why I do it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Look, I agree. I think, you know, there's just so many things you can't control in regards to what's trendy and what's working and whatnot. Sometimes you do a great job and not getting paid for it. Sometimes you do a shitty job and get paid a lot for, you know. But I like your definition of success, right? Being able to be healthy, spend time with your loved ones, creating a life on your own terms. That definitely fits my description as well. Financial wealth, I think, is a nice byproduct if it happens, but I also would agree. I would never say to someone, hey, you want to get rich quick, become a musician, right? I mean, when we look at statistics, in Australia from 2014, that's the latest numbers I could find, 97.5% of musicians who studied music cannot live from being a musician.
Wow.
Right?
That's amazing, Michel. That's amazing.
So only 2.5% actually make over 100 grand a year from their income as a musician in Australia, right? So I think we need to be realistic about what it is to become an artist. What I'm just really fascinated about is, like, what are the 2.5% doing differently? Because if that's right, what do people do at the top of their game? What do they do differently? Are they just lucky? Are they having better systems? Are they emigrating? You know, that's that I find always really interesting.
And my only thought would be, those 2.5 people would have 2.5 different answers. I think that it's so unique, and so it's so unique to your own situation.
True. But you mentioned definitely a couple of things that I found really interesting, and probably for people who, you know, just starting out, have probably never heard of, like publishing, syncing, other things that you haven't spoken about, but that are definitely important are royalties, obviously, right? Different gigs that you get paid either in percentage, producers points as well, right? Where you kind of participate in the success of the artist. Obviously paid gigs, you know, from live gigs or producer gigs or whatever, or productions or whatever. Are there other things that people should look into to diversify their income stream as a musician, as a producer?
Those are all awesome, the ones you've already raised, and those would represent the lion's share of what my income stream looks like, each of those avenues. One that's happened, and maybe it's, for me at least, it's happened in 2020, is as interesting form of consulting somehow. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a few jobs now. In fact, a good chunk of my jobs in terms of helping people with either I think of some production masterclasses I'm doing where I meet a bunch of artists and I take them through a songwriting process, or I show them things that I've learned along the way, or I help work up their material. Another one is I'm very lucky to be a composer in residence at a space here in Port Melbourne, where I'm paid for my time in terms of this residency where I get to write music in this space. And these are sort of new income streams to me, ones I wasn't necessarily looking for, but it relates to those early days where I said say yes to everything. Well, both of these opportunities came up, and I said, sure, that fits with what I am interested in. So that's a new income stream that 2020 and this weird world we're now living in has enabled.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I mean, education is the second biggest industry now, right? It is like, look at masterclass.com, right? Where Christina Aguilera shows you how to sing, and Jamie Oliver or whatever, they show you how to cook. I think it is really so important. And I think it's also a beautiful thing because, like, who are we assimilating all of that knowledge, all of that experiences, and now really paying it forward is not just a nice way to make money, but more importantly, it's super important to kind of pay forward and see the value as a person, and that knowledge, applying that to other people, right? Like we do that here, at USM, through mentoring and really helping to share our own experiences and open up doors to new generations. But it's also unbelievably refreshing to kind of reflect on your own artistry and see, like, hey, what has actually been working? Well, how do I actually produce, right? And now formulate that to kind of make that accessible. And I would definitely encourage everyone who has a certain knowledge to share that with other people. And you can do that obviously for free or for $1 or whatever. But there is a great demand in knowledge, and it's a beautiful time. I think we're getting more and more past that time of consumerism, of I think more and more people waking up to this idea, okay, well, a new t-shirt doesn't make me happier than before. A new car doesn't make me happy in the long run, but accumulating and dissecting and applying knowledge, that is the true wisdom, right? And if we have people like yourself that really can be available for that, I think that's just a beautiful cycle in life. And definitely in the future, more and more will be a very, very important income stream for artists and producers alike.
That's really beautiful, Michel. I think that's a great way of articulating it. Nice one.
Yeah, cool. All right, hey, to bring it to an end, I would love to end with some rapid fire questions.
Okay, ready.
Something ready. Okay, so what are the 3 things that you use regularly or the most when it comes to producing or making music? What 3 tools do you use the most?
Notepad and pen. First one, write things down, especially in terms of form, charts, making notes. Remember, I have terrible memory, so write it down on a piece of paper. That'd be the first thing. For me, everything is processed through my guitar. And that sounds like a strange answer in terms of production, but no, for real, I make production choices with the guitar on my knee. That's the tool I use to navigate the harmonic space, the melodic space, the rhythmic space. It's way easier to articulate musical ideas by showing rather than explaining. Mm-hmm. So just to literally perform it back to someone is super important. Then I'm a sucker for the Apple Logic. I just live inside Apple Logic. It's a terrible thing to admit, but I love it. It seems to allow me to generate quickly, but also to capture quickly. So much of what I record is recorded in the moment that it's composed, and so Apple Logic lets me do that simultaneously.
Okay, cool. So we have taking notes manually, writing them down, be with your instrument, and your favorite workstation. So for the people who have never heard about the DAW, digital audio workstation, it's a piece of software that sits on your computer, on your laptop, that transfers audio signals into your computer that you then can edit and mix and so on. Okay, cool. Second question. Do you make your bed in the morning?
Yeah.
And if so, why or why not?
That's a bizarre one. First of all, yes, I do. I sort of need home base to be in shape. Otherwise, my world's going to get out of control. The bedroom next to me has my 15-year-old son in there. And man, he is the opposite. He does not make his bed every morning. And if you're watching, go make your bed, Tana.
Yeah, I think it's very rare that a 15-year-old makes his bed. I think they have other priorities. I understand it. So why do you make your bed though?
I feel I need to know that my home base is just in shape. It's sort of a weird metaphor for life. Like if everything's okay at home, it's going to be okay outside. And in this weird year where my bedroom is home base and the rest of my apartment is the wider world, I like to know that at least my bedroom is in some sort of shape. Also, I'm lucky to have this nice bedroom which has a nice leafy outlook and gets a lot of sun in the morning. I've been hanging out in there a lot. So if my bed wasn't made, it would be weird. And I mean, I'm taking Zoom calls in there. So like if I got to at least have it in some sort of shape.
Yeah. Gotcha. Let's say a student, if you have a student of yours and he just writes you an email and he's maybe 18, 19 years old, just finished school, has been playing guitar for a while, jazz guitar, and plays a couple of gigs, and is now kind of like thinking about, uni or not, what should be my next steps. And he would ask you, what are the next 3 things for me to do to develop my career, to get into the right direction of becoming a professional artist? What would be the 3 things that you would tell him or her?
3 things, okay. But the first thing is there's no one path. There's the path I've personally gone on, which is to go to uni, and I love it. I've gone back to uni after many years away, just because I love the intellectual rigor of it. I've gone back for no professional reasons. There's no need for me to go back to uni and study. I'm doing a master's in research now, just because I love the intellectual inquiry of it. So I'm also lucky here in Australia, research masters are free, so I can do it for free. So that's great. And I love hanging out and talking to other, like exactly what we're doing now. This is what uni is like for me, just chatting. So for the emerging artists coming out, I say there's no one way. No, at no point in my life has anyone ever asked to see my uni marks in order to get a job making music. So there's zero value in having gone through a university process and in order to become. It's not some gateway. Maybe once upon a time, but maybe not even. What a tertiary education will give you is a degree of rigor. It's going to make you do lots of things you might not ordinarily do, and they do become useful professional tools. For me, along the way, being able to read music has been super useful in terms of my studio work, and in terms of the arranging. We talked briefly about arranging earlier. So there's things I learned in uni which have been useful, and people I've met specifically, colleagues of mine that I still work with, and friends I have. So what was that? Does that count as one?
That counts as one. Let's say there's no predetermined path, but definitely education is important, not necessarily formal.
Can you remind me of the question again, please?
Yeah. Michel? So what are the 3 things that you would suggest to a 18, 19-year-old upcoming guitar player, producer? What should they do next? After
the second thing is the second thing would be do it every day. If you want it to be the job that you do and you want it to be your vocation, just start doing it. That's the first thing. You should probably already will be doing this. If you're that interested and you're hearing us chatting now, you must already be. It must have already taken over your life. You've got to be bitten by the bug. So do it. It's time spent on your instrument, as if we're talking about a young guitarist, there's no shortcut. It doesn't have to be capital P practice. There's definitely, you need to put in those hours of practicing for sure, but it doesn't always have to be that. Sometimes the subconscious wants to get music out when you least suspect it, and the time spent letting your hands just wander over your instrument is where you might uncover that next thing. So it will never happen if the guitar's not in your lap. but when it's in your lap and your hands are wandering, you're going to find things, So the first point was, yeah, you don't have to go to university. I choose to and love it, but you don't have to. Second thing is do it every day. And the third thing, and this sounds kind of cheesy, but is just be a real human, be a good person, and that friendship group that you grow and that network of people that you enjoy the company of, your posse is where your art will find its home, in amongst your community. This peer group of those people you trust and love the most, you get to share your work with them, and they will give you open-hearted feedback. They will tell you those hard truths. They will share your successes. They will be there when you fail. Your posse is so important. Your community is so important. It could be your partner, it can be your friends, it can be the people you hang with. Whatever, that posse is super important home base.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I think that's really, really great advice. That's really great advice. I deeply believe in the power of community. I mean, we talked about that earlier. But yeah, finding or creating, you can do that in different ways. You can create an online mastermind where you talk about things or share things. It doesn't even have to be in your city. I often hear that from people who live in a small town where they're the only ones kind of like doing to their level. And I said, well, that's not an excuse. Even if you still go to school, you can do it online. There are already master classes, or just reach out to people online. The world is your oyster, really. That's excellent. Or look out for a mentor, look out, contact Cameron. I hope that's okay. not that you're getting like hundreds of emails, but look out for a mentor, look out for people who have already done it. I think is definitely an additional research. Same like uni, right? Learn from people who so you can avoid certain mistakes and learn from their expertise. So, right? If that's in university setting, I'm a big fan of actually contacting people you want to work with directly. If you like, I know, like when I went to uni, like a lot of my friends, they went to a certain uni because there was this guitar prof, and he was just like this unicorn, and everyone enrolled into the uni because of him. While later I found out that he also gives private lessons for much, for like a fraction of the cost, and I was like, so. It's in uni, you also pay for the toilet on the other side of the campus you will never use, right? So there's also that component. Yeah, that's cool. And my last question, Cam, also a very unusual one, and I asked it to most of my interviewees, and it is, imagine it's your last day on Earth, and unfortunately all records that you have ever done has been erased. There's no trace of your existence so far. All the articles you've written, all the music you've made, none of that has ever been published. And on your dying best, you have 10 seconds, and you can give one note to the next generation. You can put it on a little post-it note. Yeah. What would you put on there? I know that's deep.
I'll get back to you in about a year when I've figured out the answer to that. The first thing I can think of is few water relief, like the idea of being safe and happy and aware, and being aware of your last day on Earth. First of all, those things are all blessings. That's amazing. But then
what would you put on a post-it note?
Yeah, the post-it note where I just write, it's going to be okay. It is going to be okay. The idea of everything you've ever made being forgotten, well, here's the short answer. It will be. It is going to be forgotten, because there's so many of us on this planet. We are all just an equal, nearly insignificant share of this amazing planet. So it's already all forgotten. So what we're trying to do is just create beauty for those around us and those that we touch. So it's going to be okay.
I like that.
Yeah.
So many questions I have with that, but let's save that for our next part in the 15th season of Off the Records. Yeah, man, before we close shop, I just really want to acknowledge you for just being not only an inspiration to myself, but also an inspiration to a lot of other people following your path honoring what you're good at, and being okay with everything that flies your way. I love that you saying yes to everything, and being okay at failing, and being okay with it being successful in whatever measure that is. And I also want to acknowledge you paying forward what you do, giving masterclasses to others. And I love that you're still learning and have this beginner's mindset of, like going back to uni and learning something that you really want to learn because it's kind of intrinsic to you. And I think that mindset will bring you everywhere and brought you everywhere so far. And I think the last thing that I want to acknowledge you is your artwork behind you. It's such a beauty.
Yeah, welcome to my apartment. But no, thank you, Michel. Those are really kind words, and that's humbling coming from you. You're an inspiring character in your world. Everyone you touch becomes better at what they do. You are the enabler. You are the producer. That's who you are in your heart and in your core. And man, those are super kind words. I appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. All right. And for you guys out there, if you made it so far, that means that you're really serious about what you do. So congratulate yourself, because that has been probably, I think, something like an hour or so. You haven't skipped to the Funny Cat video yet, or watched John Mayer's last live record. So congratulations for learning, congratulations for investing in yourself. If you keep up that mindset for not using the shortcut all the time, but actually sticking around and saying yes because you started something and you want to finish it off, the doors will be open. And I teach that to my 5-year-old son. If you are persistent and if you're patient, the world is your oyster, right? So congratulate yourself. Watch the other videos if you feel like it. Leave us a comment, leave us a like wherever you listen to it or watch it. My name is Michel Kroll, and you were listening and watching Off the Records with Cameron. See you later.